Deborah will talk to her and tell her any exciting parts that she misses. Okay, so, all right, you guys. So we'll buckle down for this. This is all my verbiage because you can see Gareth and I have different styles. He has an outline, he's got some words, and he riffs, and I got it all written down over weeks and weeks of practicing. So now there's a link to this in the study guide that you will get at some point today. So the Mahaparinibbana Sutta is the longest one in the Pali Canon at 60 pages, and it's intended as many things. It's a teaching tool for his disciples and his lay followers, as well as a testament to the Buddha's accomplishments as a teacher, a meditator, and an arahant. So an arahant is the only person, human, who does not die. So in the Buddhist tradition. So this sutta focuses on the last 3 months of his life. And he's very sick and he's dying. We're going to hear about that because that's basically what I'm going to be emphasizing. That's what I plucked out for us to look at today. He's very sick. He's dying, and we're going to look at how he copes with his illness and what he does at the time of death, as it's recorded in the sutta. So I'll just say, so I don't bore anybody about it, the sutta, so when I put up the Fear and Fearless Sutta, and I love that sutta because it's very concrete, that's short. It's like a 1 page. And many of the suttas, there's the long discourses. This one is from the Book of Long Discourses, but most suttas are, even the Digna Nikaya, the long discourses are maybe 25 pages. This one is just hugely long. And because it's an important sutta, it's been added to many times. So it's narratively choppy. From a storyteller's point of view, because cool things will happen and you'll get interested in the story on what's going on, and then it'll be interrupted by another piece. So it's really taken a lot of time to figure out how because I had pages of stuff here, just pages of stuff, but I focused on what I think will help us today. So, but I want to summarize some of the sutta because it is important, and it's, despite its complexity, it's really beautiful. So it's trying to do many things. So all the Buddha's emphasis is on 3 things. The Eightfold Path is the 8 parts, the 8 steps are broken down into groups of 3: ethical behavior, concentration, and meditation. So in this sutta, he goes through what we now would call the 37 wings of awakening, and he addresses not just monks and nuns, but his lay followers. The teaching is a little different for lay followers like us, a little different than for monks and nuns, but basically he wants us he wants us to practice becoming more skillful, understand our minds, our habitual mind patterns that are unskillful, practice generosity towards others. And he emphasizes that to his monks and nuns: you live together and you need to be careful how you treat each other. So generosity, loving kindness, compassion, right speech, right effort, mindfulness, concentration, the 3 poisons, the 5 hindrances, they're all in the 37 wings of awakening. And in addition to the ethical piece, there's a mini section on how to practice mindfulness, which is the key to reducing all kinds of suffering, including fear of death. So there's the Satipatthana Sutta, which many people I know that are participating have studied and looked at over the years. That's a big, important sutta on how to practice mindfulness, how to meditate and practice mindfulness, and observe what's going on in your mind. And then concentration is the other piece, because concentration helps us build stability of mind, calmness, peacefulness, and stability of mind. So there are little mini lectures on these in there. Um, and he tells us to make peace with impermanence, including his impermanence. So there's Ananda is a major character in the sutta, and it's very clear in the sutta that his personality is more is very different from the Buddha's. Buddha is very stoic, what we would call stoic and pragmatic. He's also human, so he gets irritated, and that's kind of important for us to see. He's human, so he practices, but he gets exasperated at Ananda. And Ananda is a worrier. He's the Buddha's cousin and has been his attendant and part of his Sangha for decades. And Ananda is very sweet, but he will, as you're going to see a little bit of, he will kind of bug, he will say, don't die. And a couple times in the sutta, he tells them, don't die, don't go. And the Buddha says, Ananda, have you been listening to me? What? I'm impermanent. Even the Buddha, even the realized one is impermanent. So that's emphasized throughout. There are many visitors that ask questions. They will come in and ask questions that allow them to elucidate teaching points. There are moments of supernatural appearances by gods and devas. Mara, who is the personification of, we can't really call it evil because that's not, but unskillful and mind states that'll take us down the wrong path. And so Mara shows up. And there's some magic by the Buddha himself. He needs to drink some water, and the water in the stream is dirty, so he clears it. And all the supernatural stuff is put in there because, well, there's a lot of reasons why, but it's to show how grand he is, how powerful he is. But as Analayo will tell us, he's just masterful in his practices, and that's why, and his teachings are very wise. So, and then finally, after he dies, and we're going to read that little section, there's a lot of information on how to treat the Buddha's corpse and his relics after his death. So now we will do this that I hope is helpful for you guys, or will become helpful. So this next paragraph here is to keep in the back of our minds as we practice. So what does the title mean? Maha Parinibbana Sutta. So as a lot of you know, Nibbana, which is the Pali, Sanskrit is nirvana. Pali, the Buddha wanted to have the teachings learned in a language that was separate from the developing Vedic religions. The Upanishads many of them were being recited and so on. And so Pali is different. So Nibbana is most commonly translated as the blowing out of a fire. It is specifically the blowing out of the fires that cause greed, hatred, and delusion, greed, ill will, and delusion, and the little flavors that can cause us suffering, irritation, frustration, dejection, anger, many of the little flavors, sensual desire for so many different things that we experience. So Nibbana means the blowing out of a fire. So in his introduction to the sutta, I've put links to two different versions in the study guide at the end. Tanisaro has a very good introduction that kind of explains all the disparate bits, and why the sutta is so disjointed. But in my selections, I used a different translation that I liked a little better. The language is a little more poetic. So So in his introduction to the sutta, Thanissaro Bhikkhu explains that Buddha used the word nibbana in light of the way in which the processes of fire were viewed in his time. A burning fire was seen as clinging to its fuel in a state of hot agitation. When going out, it let go of its fuel and reached a state of freedom, cooling, and peace. So nibbana means, so given this understanding of fire, Thanissaro writes, the term nibbana was derived etymologically from the negative prefix ner, the root vana, or binding, unbinding. So Thanissaro has a book on this that's very good called Mind Like Fire Unbound. And what is being unbound here is both mind and form. All five aggregates are free at last from the fires and fetters that cause suffering. So that's like and I know because Gareth knows a lot more about, he can go way into all this, but that's a summary of what unbinding means. So in Pali, the root of peri is per, which denotes a completion of a forward movement. So this is defined, parinibbana is a total unbinding then. So the word maha means great. Thus, this sutta is about the parinibbana, the total unbinding, the complete putting out of the fires of the greatest teacher in Buddhism that developed Buddhism. So with that knowledge in the back of our minds, we are going to focus on how the Buddha, on both how he copes with the severe illnesses and with the dying process itself. So I'll set the scene. He's 80 years old. He's been a teacher and wandering mendicant for nearly 45 years since his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. In the last year of his life, he falls ill several times with what is said every time: dysentery, diarrhea, and bloody stool. And maybe he had stomach or pancreatic or intestinal cancer or colon cancer or something, but it sounds very unpleasant. So, and this is repeated many times. He stops what he's doing to cope with this because they're wandering mendicants. They stop during the raiding season, but they are moving. They are often moving, and they go and stay in places in meadows and places that the people who own the land allow them to stay, and they go on alms rounds. So early in the sutta, the first time this description appears is when the Buddha directs his Sangha to the village of Baluva to shelter and practice during the rainy season. Once there, the Buddha fell severely ill, struck by dreadful pains, close to death, but he endured unbothered with mindfulness and situational awareness. And this is the first of three times where this specific description is mentioned. And his responses to when he falls severely ill are, he endured unbothered with mindfulness and situational awareness. So, wow. So now, soon after he recovered from the first bout, he came out from his dwelling, and because it's rainy season, and I've seen these in India. They're caves built into rock faces. So the venerable Ananda went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, "Sir, it's fantastic that the Buddha is comfortable and well, because when the Buddha was sick, my body felt like it was drugged. I was disoriented, and the teachings weren't clear to me." So to this, the Buddha replies that it is important that mendicants, including Ananda himself, take refuge themselves in the Dharma. He has given them all the information they need to liberate themselves from suffering by practicing ethical behavior, practicing mindfulness, and practicing concentration. Then he says, "I'm now old, elderly, and senior. I'm advanced in years and have reached the final stage of my life. I'm currently 80 years old. Just as a decrepit old cart is kept going by a rope, in the same way, The realized one's body is kept going as if by a rope. Sometimes the realized one, not focusing on any signs and with the cessation of certain feelings, enters and remains in the signless immersion of the heart. Only then does the realized one's body become more comfortable. So for our purposes today, it's worth taking a deeper look at the Buddha, how the Buddha describes how he gets comfortable. How does he cope with this? Um, how does he cope with the illness? So we're going to look at what's meant by signless immersion. Now, I have references to teachers who teach this, books and talks online, because I am finding this stuff really cool and very helpful. And when we have the question and answer period later on today, Gareth can go more in depth with each of these because he's got a lot more meditation experience under his belt than I do. And Tom can, and maybe Dick can also. But I am finding all of this helpful in my practice, to practice with signlessness in my mind. So what is it? So in Buddhism in general, signlessness refers to a state of mind in which there is an absence of sign, of constructions, of interpretations of experience. So Anlayo Bhikkhu, who has written many books and he's an excellent teacher, refers to this state as one of non-attention and non-construction. He calls it an attitude of letting go and a freshness, which we'll come back to that a little bit later. So what is meant by constructions are perceptions and mental formations. That's our likes and our dislikes that we attach to and push away. But when we're pushing away something that we dislike, that's aversion, we're clinging. We're clinging. We're still clinging. So it's whether it's a like or a dislike. So the mental formations are the stories that we tell about them. And Tanisaro calls them mental fabrications, stuff we make up in our minds. So it's important to remember that a perception doesn't arise in our minds value free. So to abide without perception would be quite a meditative achievement. And that's in the people. There's some people from my Sangha up here, and I can't see everybody's faces anymore, that were attending today. And we've been reading we were reading a really good book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Understanding the Mind, where Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the seeds and how we carry with us in our minds seeds from our childhood and also from our ancestors, seeds of mental states and attitudes that we get from our parents and that they got from their parents that we don't even understand. And we have cultural seeds. So anyway, our perception doesn't arise in our minds value free. So to abide without perception would be quite a meditative achievement. And this is what mindfulness does. We practice with mindfulness so that we see what are our perceptions? What do we cling to? What do we push away? What stories are we telling? Signless immersion does not appear to be a jhana state per se. We'll talk about that a little bit because I don't want anybody to get scared by that word if they do. But it seems adjacent to one. It seems achievable to some degree. And I think if we practice, it'll help us. Whether we anyway, Gareth has a good attitude on that. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's like you get into the state that is peaceful and has some other qualities as described. So as Lee Brosington put in his February lectures on this topic, and these are on Audio Dharma, I put a link to it. He's got a long series on signlessness. He said, there are no constructions in a signless state of mind, just an unfolding, just an unfolding, just an unfolding. This is different than the situational awareness that the Buddha uses when he's not quite at the end that he references, and we'll talk about that. So Analayo contrasts signless immersion with the Buddhist experience and practice of deathlessness, a state which he describes as a state of mind in which the sign of death, our knowledge of death, does not agitate the mind, so we can die without fear or regret. It's like, poof, it's Gareth falling from the sky at peace. So hopefully not anytime soon for any of us. Not that I'm clinging. Okay. So I'm not going to say what I have there because I can't really get in. We can't really get into that. So, but I do think the state of signless immersion is something we can learn to practice and achieve to whatever degree that will help us when we are sick, and when we are dying. If we all know people who have had long illnesses. I know some of you know that, and many of us have lost family and friends who've died after long illnesses. So if that's going to happen to us, if that's going to happen to me, I want to be ready. I want to have something in mind that I can use to help. And helping me be more comfortable will help the other people around me be more comfortable. And that's something I know we all think about too. So during the next meditation period, I'm going to give you some things to practice with. So now we come to the repeated statement that the Buddha endures at multiple places in the sutta, where he goes through diarrhea and bloody stool, unbothered with mindfulness and situation awareness. So that's a different state than mindfulness. I think the immersion is more an unfolding and there's less attachment. And mindfulness and situational awareness are more of a letting go that's a more surface. So I think we've all heard teachers say, and we've experienced it ourselves, where when you experience some physical pain and you notice it and you focus on it for a second, this pain in my foot, sometimes it really does go away. So I'll do that when I swim. I swim laps 3 times a week, and I'll often get a cramp, and here's a cramp. And when I look at the cramp, usually it goes away. Sometimes not. But so mindfulness and situational awareness. So he's letting go. He's not attaching to what he's experiencing. He's got enough awareness to know what's going on around him. And he's kind of lightly meditating, I think. But he's not as deep into it as he gets with signless immersion. So uh, and so this is just an aside, but it's something for us to think about. Probably we've all thought about it because you know, many of us, we do. So in contemporary life, with those with lingering and sudden terminal illness are often highly medicated in their last weeks and days to cushion the physical and emotional pain of the dying process. So many of us have seen this close up. Our organs will shut down, and we are unable to eat or drink. We don't want to. It's got to be uncomfortable. And we can be heavily medicated. We can choose to be not medicated or some, place in between. So it is worth considering how we want to approach that. So what I want to help us do today, because I perhaps carry more fear of death, and fear what Sherry brought up and what Carrie brought up, fear of suffering at the end. So how can we work with that? So we can practice with mindfulness and situational awareness, where we are aware of the pain and but we don't attach to the pain. It's coming, it's going, it's coming, it's going. All our thoughts, all our feelings come and go, come and go. So uh, I think if we want to be mindful, enduring, and situationally aware as we die of an illness, if we are so lucky that we die that way, we will need to practice with resilience, compassion, and mindfulness now. So that's the idea of today is let's practice and deepen our practice. And Gareth pointed out something that he can talk about more later also, that he reminded me the other day as I'm talking to him about, I'm saying all this and I'm not dying. I know people who are very sick. But, and how do we get there? And he reminded me that the Buddha, this is a gradual path of practice. The Buddha achieved enlightenment, as the story goes, 7 years after going forth. Um, and even that's accelerated. But I've been practicing, I think, for 16 or 17 years, and it has helped so much. And the more I practice, the deeper I'm able to go and the more peace I feel. So it's a graduated practice. And those of us who, even if we can't go on long retreats, we can still do this. We can practice this in when we meet with our sanghas once a week or twice a week, when we sit at home. We can practice this when we walk. So this is the encouragement. So I just wanted to, this is repeated, I don't know, 6 times in the sutta, such as ethics, such as immersion, such as wisdom. When immersion is imbued with ethics, it is very fruitful and beneficial because we are more skillful. We'll become more skillful and cause less suffering to others and to ourselves. When wisdom is imbued with immersion, it's very fruitful and beneficial. When the mind is imbued with wisdom, it is rightly freed from the defilements, namely the defilements of sensuality, desire to be reborn, and illness. Desire to be reborn, in that it means in terms of dependent origination or codependent arising, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it. And Gareth will talk about those this afternoon. So now we come to the very end of the Buddha's life, the last hours and minutes. So this is an interesting set piece that is spread over several sections of the sutta, because he starts to die, and then somebody gets an idea, and somebody's got to be notified, or somebody comes to visit. So we're going to jump right to the end. There's a set piece in here about he has foreknowledge of his death, and he's given a meal that he knows is going to kill him. And he asked the person who gives him the meal, Kunda the smith, to prepare 2 meals and only give the one to him and the other to his mendicants, so that they do not die by what he is fed. But he also makes sure, because he is kind, he makes sure that people understand that Kunda did nothing wrong, that it is an honor to give a Buddha his dying meal. So it's just an interesting set piece that is spread all over. So after the Buddha has eaten his last meal from Kunda, the smith, he fell severely ill with bloody dysentery, struck by dreadful pains, close to death. But at first he did endure unbothered with mindfulness and situational awareness, light awareness of what's going on. He's in a meditative state, but he's not going really deep yet. So he's letting go, he's not attaching, but he knows. So nonetheless, in a solid grove near Kusinara, the Buddha humbly said, "I can go no further, Ananda. Prepare a resting place for me between these 2 large solid trees." There the Sangha gathers round, and the Buddha asks if anyone has any final questions for him. He repeats this 3 times. No questions are asked. He understands that his mendicants, his monks, are very well learned in practice, and he understands that they love him. His last words are, "Conditions fall apart, persist with diligence." That just sounds so much like the Buddha I've come to know in these suttas and teachings. Conditions fall apart. Everything is impermanent. persist with diligence. So the Buddha displays in this sutta, and in many, many sutta, and what he wants us to develop is, Analayo says this. He says, the Buddha displays a mastery of meditative attainments, illustrating superb mastery of the mind. So at the very end, the Buddha enters the jhanas, goes through the first four successively, reverses through them, and then goes through them again. So this is a little tedious, but I'm going to read it anyway. And then I'll say a word or two about these, because I don't want people to feel intimidated by this. So the jhanas are immersive. So he enters in this, he'll enter signless immersion in this process. But he also goes even deeper than that. So then the Buddha entered the first absorption. Emerging from that, he entered the second level of concentration, immersion. Emerging from that, he entered into emerge from the third absorption, the fourth absorption, the dimension of infinite space, the dimension of infinite consciousness, the dimension of nothingness, the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. Then he entered the cessation of perception and feeling. So then Venerable Ananda said to Venerable Anuruddha, Honorable Anuruddha, has the Buddha become fully extinguished? No, Reverend Ananda. He has entered the cessation of perception and feeling. Then the Buddha emerged from the cessation of perception and feeling and entered the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. Emerging from that, he successively entered into and emerged from the dimension of nothingness, of infinite consciousness, the dimension of infinite space, the fourth absorption, the third absorption, the second absorption, the fourth absorption. Emerging from that, he entered into and emerged from the second and then third. Then he entered the fourth, and emerging from that, the Buddha immediately became fully extinguished. So he goes through, I'm sure this took some time. This may have taken some time. He was such a good meditator that maybe it didn't take very long. But I want to, I was listening to some talks on rebirth, and I put a link to them in the study guide at the end of the study guide. And a monk, a young monk, he's a young American monk he's like 30 and he's been a monk for 10 years. He's very articulate. And he says, I want to say to people who don't know what to think about rebirth, or what sometimes gets confused and called reincarnation, the Buddha knew so much and he was wise about so much. And maybe we should be open to that. And the jhanas, there is, as Gareth knows and can speak to with more depth than I can, in the various forms of Buddhism taught in this country, there's a lot of debate. Are the jhanas important or are they not? And I think it's worth us practicing. I don't think we need to be concerned about numbers, absorptions, unless we want to, because I've known people in our Sangha who have gone to jhana retreats, and I've got links to teachers who teach them. And I would do that if I could, if I had the money and I could take the time off of work to do that, vacation time. But even if we can't, we can reach some state of signlessness to bring us peace. And the more we practice, the more peaceful we get. As Ajahn Chah says, if we let go a little, we'll have a little peace. If we let go a lot, we'll have a lot of peace. If we let go entirely, we will be free. So at this point, so we're going to read a poem and then we're going to do a meditation. So at the end, there's lightning and flowers fall, divas sing in the sky, and it's at some point there came a great earthquake, awe-inspiring and hair-raising, and thunder cracked. And we had the following verses were recited. Can I get a volunteer to read these 3 short verses, please? Any volunteers? Kip, did you wave? Yay! Okay. Okay, hold on. So just go ahead and read the little line in between. So go ahead and start can you see where my cursor is? Right here.
Yes.
Go ahead and start there. Thank you.
At that time, Brahma Sarampati recited this verse. All creatures in this world must lay down this bag of bones, for even a teacher such as this, unrivaled in the world, the realized one, attained to power, the Buddha, became fully extinguished. When the Buddha became fully extinguished, Saka, Lord of Gods, recited this verse. Oh, conditions are impermanent. Their nature is to rise and fall. Having arisen, they cease. Their stilling is true bliss. When the Buddha became fully extinguished, Venerable Anuruddha
That's 5.
recited recited this verse. There was no more breathing, for the poised one of steady heart uh, imperator
Imperturbable.
imperturbable committed to peace. The sage has done this his time. He put up with painful feelings without flinching. The liberation of his heart was like the extinguishing of a lamp.
Thank you. The liberation of his heart was like the extinguishing of a lamp. And then at the end of that section, there's just one line that I think is lovely. And it says, then the venerables Ananda and Anuruddha stayed up all night talking Dharma. So what is better than talking Dharma? Sometimes ice cream is good, but Dharma, pretty amazing. All right, thank you. Thank you, Kip. So now we'll get on with the second meditation period, and then we will, what are we doing? I think we're taking a lunch, a 30-minute lunch period. So I forgot to get my bell. So it's okay with me. I forgot to go get my bell. Not yet, in a minute. Just all I'm going to do is read the setup, and then we'll go ahead and start. Thank you. And then, so what we're going to practice with is we've only got 30 minutes, but it's enough to do some experimenting. So I'm going to read a little excerpt of another sutta that is good. It's Bahia of the Bark Cloth. And Bahia is, and we'll use the sutta to illustrate and inspire us. And I'll share some of my practices in this direction. And then I'll give you some tips, and you guys can see what comes up, see what you can do and what comes up. So Bahia of the Bark Cloth was an honored and venerable mendicant in the Buddha's time. At some point in his practice, he worried, am I an arahant, one who does not die, or one who has entered the path to arahantship? Because only arahants do not suffer rebirth. They exit samsara, like the Buddha, through final nibbana. A diva gently informed him, heard him asking that as he was practicing in seclusion, and said, no, you are not an arahant, and encouraged him to ask the Buddha for advice. So Bahia went to the Buddha and asked him to teach him the Dhamma. And in fact, in the sutta, it's funny. He didn't just ask, he pestered him. He followed him around on arms rounds until the Buddha said, herein, Bahia, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. In the sensed will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized will be merely what is cognized. In this way, you should train yourself, Bahia. When, Bahia, for you in the seen is merely what is seen, and what is cognized is merely what is cognized, then, Bahia, you will not be with that. When, Bahia, you are not with that, then, Bahia, you will not be in that. When you are not in that, Bahia, you will be neither here nor there, nor in between, nor beyond, nor in between the two. This is the end of suffering. So what's going on in that is something I've been practicing with up here when I am meditating in the Sangha I attend up here, and when I otherwise practice. So we want to practice, we want to see. When we are seeing, see. When we are walking, walk. When we are hearing, hear. We don't attach to it. We don't say, oh, bird song. We don't, what is seen, we see what is there. And what is meant in the second paragraph here is when you, Bahia, when you, for you, when the seen is merely seen and the cognized is merely cognized, there is no you in that. There is no you because you're not attaching to it. As soon as we do our likes and dislikes, as soon as I'm sitting in the Sangha up here, and it's in a Vietnamese temple, and the floor is a kind of a burgundy maroon carpet, and I will sit on the floor on a cushion, and I've opened my eyes and attached to the carpet. It's the carpet, and I'm like, oh, that's so pretty. It's so clean. So when I can see and just see, and I don't attach to it, I don't say, oh, it's beautiful, or oh my God, that is so noisy, that leaf blower. And we practice over and over. That's the first step to signlessness. It's a first entry. Once we can get to the point where when we are seeing, we just see. When we are walking, we walk. When we are hearing, we hear. When we have a thought that's cognizing, we don't attach to it and go tell a story about it. We don't say, oh, does that, what did that person mean? Are they mad at me? We don't do any of that. We just right here, right now, nothing, nothing else, just seeing. And this is practice. We're lay people, so it's fine to I'm going to go for a walk as soon as we're done today outside. It's a gorgeous day, and I'm going to go enjoy it. But for our purposes, when we want to practice reducing suffering at the end of life and otherwise, when we are severely ill, then we practice seeing without attaching. And so to reach an immersive state without with signlessness, that's going even deeper than that. There's no signs. It's a deeper meditative state because there's no constructions in our minds. So we've got to practice to get there. It's empty. So we let go of all signs. Signs are likes and dislikes. It's identification. It's mental formation. I'm identifying whatever it is I'm looking at, for example, and then I'm telling a story about it, or I like it or dislike. So we just sit and we empty our minds. Empty. Nothing coming, nothing going. Empty. Nothing coming, nothing going. So that's what we want to do in this practice. And today in this 30 minutes, and it's kind of like you can, in the basic mindfulness instruction, you can drop that away, or you can practice that where you're not attaching. Things are coming and going in your mind. Sounds are coming and going. You hear people, there are doors shut in the Sangha. The cat's nails are walking on my floor, but we're not attaching. And we can try to go deeper into that where we're just going deeper in an immersive state. I find it's very easy to get there when I'm tired. It's very easy for me to get immersive quicker. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to go until, oh my God, how did this happen? Should we make this 20 minutes? Because
That's
we're a
good.
little, you want to do that? All
Do
right,
that.
you guys, we'll do this 20 minutes, but hopefully we get the idea and we'll have time to meditate more today too. So thank you.